Welcome to our Get Motivated episode of CAPS Talk. I'm Dr. Argumosa, clinical therapist at CAPS FIU.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Mandy Read, and I'm the postdoctoral fellow at FIU CAPS, and I'm happy to be here today.
So today we are going to discuss motivation and how we stay productive even when lacking our motivation. Dr. Reed, I was wondering, have you ever felt low motivation or less than enthusiastic to do something?
Definitely. I can even give you an example in my current day-to-day. Right now, I'm studying for the licensure exam, and sometimes I can think of every reason as to why I'd rather not look at my books, and it's sometimes the hardest thing to get started when, I don't have that motivation or desire to do it.
That's a really great example. And before we get into what has worked for you to help you push through and stay motivated, I kind of was wondering what motivation means to you.
Yeah, when I think about motivation, I think to me it means a general desire or a willingness to do something. And I think of it as a feeling or an urge that prompts me to get going on any task or activity that I have to do. But when I'm thinking about motivation, I also think that there is a misconception that we do need motivation to do things. And I think the truth is that it makes tasks, activities, assignments, it makes all those things easier, it makes them more enjoyable. However, I think we can still complete them without it. Is it harder? Definitely. But I think what we know is that our bodies and our minds are capable. And the key is often we just have to push ourselves to do things anyways. But I think also when I think about motivation, I think it's something that can change based on many different things. So it can change based on our mood. It can change based on the environment or the context that we're in, based on the nature of the task that we're doing. So I think there's so many external factors like these that can impact our motivation, and that can even change from one day to the next.
It sounds like your definition of motivation is fluid and you allow for moments in which it ebbs and flows. I've found that for me, sometimes avoidance of something that I'm not super excited about leads to lack of motivation. So that avoidance can feel good right in that moment, but I'm usually regretful afterwards when the lack of motivation catches up. Has that ever happened to you?
For sure. I think avoidance gives us that sense of instant gratification. Like you said, in the moment it feels good, like, yes, I've avoided that thing, I don't have to do it right now. But then I think that gratification that we feel from it, that reinforces the behavior of avoiding. And then we put things off, avoid them, until we end up in a time crunch and we have heightened feelings of stress. And so I think it's important to think about stress in the context of, our avoidance or our behaviors. So if we think about stress as something on a continuum, there can be kinds of stress that are motivating and energizing and help us get to do things that we need to do. Whereas on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's another type of stress that promotes avoidance and that feeling of being overwhelmed, and that's something that we call distress. And so it's thinking about those two different types of stress and the ways that that's going to impact our ability to be productive and, directly influence our behaviors. So I think a main thing in thinking about our feelings of stress are looking at the triggers or the sources, the things that cause us to start feeling stressed, and then evaluating how we can intervene in ways that are helpful. So, for example, I think, when we have a feeling, it's really hard to change that feeling. And I think what we can more easily change maybe are the ways that we're thinking about that situation. So we can start looking at factors that we have control over and things that we can work on and make an impact. So, for example, like our thoughts or our actions, that's where we can start, being able to try and look at a situation in a different sense. If we use like what's happening in the world right now, the pandemic, there are certain things that are out of our control. For example, how long the pandemic will last, what other people will do in terms of abiding by guidelines. We don't have control over those things, but what we can control are our own actions, or the way that we're thinking about how we can be, our best selves during this time. And so I think a big part of the process as well is being kind to yourself and recognizing that you're giving your best, and your best that might look different from day to day, and that's okay. And so it's honoring where you're at, helping yourself to best manage and cope with those difficulties.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I agree, how I speak to myself plays a big role in how I feel and what I feel that I'm capable of. For me, it's recognizing even the small wins that can help lead me to feeling more productive. I sometimes focus on making small, achievable goals to break up a bigger goal into more manageable pieces. So the more of those small kind of baby goals that I'm able to achieve, the more my motivation grows and I feel accomplished. And that tends to add up for me.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I definitely agree with that. I think as human beings in general, we feel rewarded by being able to accomplish our goals. And so if we think about just the concept of goals, it's important for us to differentiate between what types of goals we have. So, for example, our short term goals, and these are really important in terms of our sense of self efficacy, meaning, our thoughts about our ability to do something, our sense of accomplishment, and making steps toward bigger goals. So, those would be like our longest term goals. And so, I think another thing to think about is, the importance of being realistic in the expectations that we set for ourselves. And, like for example, if you have a 25-page paper, trying to write that in one night and get an A on it the next day, that might be a stretch. I mean, I'm not saying that it can't happen or it's not possible, but we want to be kind to ourselves in terms of the expectations and the pressures that we're putting on ourselves and the things that we're striving for. Because what we know is that this can impact how we feel. And so when we feel more capable, when we feel like we're more likely to, you know, accomplish something, we're likely igniting that internal sense of motivation to continue going.
Yeah, setting realistic goals is so important to be mindful of in working towards increasing motivation and feeling accomplished. I also like to think about people who I admire and the qualities that I admire in them. Keeping that perspective about my values and aspirations combined with the awareness of what I'm capable of helps me find motivation when it seems to have gone on vacation.
Yeah, I think that's such a great way to think about it. And I would agree, being able to borrow ideas or strategies from people you look up to, it can be a great way to get some new ideas for strategies and skills that you can try. And it's keeping in mind that that's for sure something that might be a learning curve for each of us, is figuring out or navigating when we try these different things, what's most effective for us. So it's kind of like trial and error, seeing what the outcome is and what works best for us, because that might be different from person to person. And then it's also thinking about, you can have physical reminders as well. So I'm a big fan of to-do lists, which help keep you on track with your goals. I also think something that's effective is using rewards for yourself. I think we often think of rewards for kids or things like that, but I think just generally, as people, we respond well to being rewarded for the work that we're putting in. And so I think choosing things that are fun or meaningful to you and using them as ways to sustain your motivation can be really helpful. Another thing I would recommend is definitely talking with friends or family about your goals, because in one way, that this is a way that we can maintain accountability for ourselves. That if we're telling someone else we're going to do something, we're more accountable. People know about it, and then also just the support. So having support is a big part of being able to get through difficult things in our life, and so I think that's going to be a very important factor as well. And then additionally, something that I think is one of the most important is self-care, and it's taking care of ourselves. And that way we can continue feeling energized, refreshed, without burning out and without feeling depleted. And so the last thing I'll leave you with is that it's reminding ourselves to take it one step at a time. We can make small steps to making changes, and we can always reach out for help when we need it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Reed. There were some really helpful tips and suggestions that I think others will find really helpful as well. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here.